Bonjour and welcome to Apex Instant Tips, episode number 163, brought to you most Fridays at 12:05 Eastern Time. We're your hosts. I'm Anton.
And I'm Marwa. Hi, Anton.
Hey, Marwa, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, this tip today starts with where Joel Coleman in episode 12 kind of left off related to Apex debug. As we prepared for this tip, Marwa, we found that it took a little longer than we expected.
Yes, it did.
At some point you said to me, oh my gosh, this needs to be a webinar. And then we got to, it needs to be like a whole class. But
Exactly.
so we've tried to trim it down into 5 minutes. I don't think we're going to make it 5 minutes, but we got a few topics that we want to hit on. And so we're going to start with just a quick reminder of what Joel talked about in episode 12. Marwa, you remember what that was?
Yes, he talked about how to debug a user session remotely by using a different way. Like, I can show you how to.
Sure. So briefly, we often, I see a lot of developers, they enable debug like this, but this would enable debug for my session. If I wanted to debug somebody else's session, how would I do that?
So you would click on the little icon, yes, right there, and go to monitor activity.
And I always open it in a new tab so that I can keep this open here.
Yes, and there you can select active sessions and you get the session of that user.
Right. And if it's another user, what they have up here in their URL, that's going to be the right thing. Sometimes this will, if you're also in the builder and you're looking at your own session, this number won't actually match your session. You might want to check here and make sure. In this case, it does match right now. Minutes ago, when I was using this same page, it didn't match. Sometimes what you'll see is your builder's session ID up there. And so you want to make sure that you're not using this session ID, you're using this session ID if you're doing your own. If you're doing somebody else's, it will be, you'll do theirs. And so now I'm going to kick off the timer because that kind of gives us the background as to how to get here. The first tip in all of this is that I no longer ever, I never, ever, ever do this. Never do this. I always come here to enable my session or to turn on debug. So I'm going to come in here. This is my session. I use this debug level here to enable and debug, disable debug. Marwa, we spent about 15 minutes just talking about reasons to do it this way instead of the other way. There's so many reasons that this is better, but I'm going to point out just a couple really quickly. This has a lot more options here than this one over here. This one, whenever you switch it here, it reloads the whole page. There's a whole bunch of other reasons. We're not going to go into them all, but here we go. We've got this. We know how to do this. Another big reason is that Apex debug, we think of it as being a super little piece of code, but it's not, right?
No, it's not. It's actually more complicated than that.
So it doesn't just open an autonomous transaction and write to a table. For example, it's got flood control, right, Marwa?
Yes, it does. And it has a limit like 50,000 rows. And actually, you can change that. And you actually mentioned that on your blog post.
Right. I have a whole blog post about the flood control. It's over here. You can take a look at it. But you're right. So that's one thing it has. It has a whole bunch of other features as well. For example, I don't know if you've ever experienced that if you're running a slow running page and you try to look at the message log, you might not see them for a while and then they all show up.
At once, yes. Like sometimes when I'm monitoring a page that logs some messages, I don't get those messages for a while, but all of a sudden I get a bunch of them.
That's because the Apex debug routine bundles them up into thousands and writes them 1,000 at a time because it's more performant. So they do a ton of things around performance. They write them in 1,000 at a time. The other thing that I'll point out, is that that's true unless you're in the full trace. If you're in full trace, they no longer bundle them up. They just write them as you go. So there are different quirks there. The other thing I'll say is if you have a builder session like I do right now, and you log a warning, even if you're not in debug mode, warnings will show up. So if I'm not in debug mode, I'm not in debug mode right now. If I come to this page and I use apex debug.warning, I'm going to show you this little routine right here, this process. If I were to uncomment this and do warning, that warning would show up, even if I wasn't in debug mode. But that's because I'm logged into the builder. Those warnings don't show up if you're not logged into the builder. So little things like that, there's lots of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's a complex piece of code.
Yes, and also Apex debug.error will always log, even if you're not in a debug mode.
Yes, errors always log. So right, so some things like that. The other thing that I want to make sure we cover is one of the reasons I like to come to this page is I actually like to use application trace instead of full trace. And over here, it's got different names. You can do the same thing, but usually I think app trace is better than full trace. And I'm going to show you a particular reason why. If I go ahead and switch this to full trace, Apex trace, and I apply the changes, and then I refresh this page here, I'm going to get a debug output. So let's come back here. We'll get my debug output. I'm just going to click go. I don't have to refresh this whole page. I can just click go. I've got some debug output here, and I'm going to search for bind as. And you're going to see right here, I've got a whole bunch of bind as's, and they're due to a process. Right here, it looks like this bind as takes 2 full seconds to run. The other one takes almost no time at all, but this bind as takes 2 full seconds.
And this is kind of confusing for the developer.
Why would that happen? Well, because Apex, when you're in this full trace mode, Apex trace, you're tracing a whole bunch of stuff that Apex does that you may not really care about. If I go back to application trace and I rerun this exact same page, and I take a look at the output now, first of all, we're going to see that the page actually runs a lot faster. I'm going to close out those old ones. I'll hit go again. I'll get my new trace. Now, when I look at this, when I look for bind as, and we're going to be way over today because there's just so much to talk about when it comes to Apex debug. When I look for bind as now, I don't even see it. There is no bind as, and that's because it didn't put so much stuff in the log. The log is much smaller, and what we can see is that 2 seconds is actually due. Oops. That 2 seconds is actually due to this code right here. And you can see it's right here. That's why I've got those 2 seconds.
Now it's more clear.
All those bindings make...
and that's for the full trace, right?
The full trace, yes.
Which is sometimes good because we can get the explained plan for object reports sometimes. So that's
right,
with
that's
the full
right.
trace.
You don't get an explain plan if you do this. So if I come back here and I do Apex trace and I apply changes, another great thing about using this page is you can make the changes here and you don't have to re-render this whole page to make things. If I just click go, this session is now in full trace mode because I did it on the other page. I'll just click go. Instead of getting the trace of the whole page, I'm just going to get the trace of what happened when I click go. I'll come back in here. You'll see the difference is it's no longer having rendered the whole page. It just did the plugin. So I can just look at that. When I do that, I get that explain plan, which I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I get all the binds and everything else, but I do get an explain plan out of this. At least I should. Did I not? Let me see. Did I not put it in full Apex trace? I did. And I should get the explain plan. And we did this just minutes ago. Let me just redo this. Let me make sure I'm in Apex trace. Yep. Apply changes. I'm going to click go again. We should get a full explain plan out of this. Go. We'll see. Maybe I didn't put it in full trace mode. All right. So I don't know what's going on, Marwa. This should be working. I'm going to refresh the whole page, see if I get it. see why I'm not getting it. Let's try it one more time here. I'm going to click go. This time I rendered the whole page. Let's see what we get. We should get an explain plan out of this. This is live. I wonder if it's because it has already done it. You can see it's much bigger now. Oh, there it is. Oh,
There it
it
is.
is. So it did. I did get the execution plan now. I can't tell you why I didn't before, but you'll get it. You'll get the execution plan if you're in the full trace mode. And so here we get the whole plan. All right, so we're already over time, but I have a few more things that I would like to get through. But before I continue, I'm gonna look at a few of these comments. So to add the link for the gear to the actual monitoring section of the workspace, add the link for the gear. The actual. I don't know what this means, so Rich, I'm going to suggest that you open that enhancement request. So is it only full trace that we should not enable from the app running? Honestly, so my feeling here is I never ever use this anymore. I never use this. I always do it from this session detail. And there are a whole bunch of reasons for it. I like this page much better. The page view, for one thing, is sorted by time, not by the view identifier. So sometimes when you do this and you do view debug here, it's not even in the right order because this view identifier isn't always increasing. So you'll see that sometimes something, these don't actually come in the right order. Like this happened 2 minutes ago and this happened 3 minutes ago, right? I would like this to be on top of that. So, I mean, you can always resort it, but I don't like this page as much. And if you do both, if you use both this page and this page, it gets confusing what trace mode you're in. I always use this page. This page I just think is better. It's easier to open things in a new tab so you can keep hold of them. I always like this page better. So Haniel, I am going to write a blog post that is going to deep dive into all of this because there are a whole bunch of reasons that this is better. I'll hit more in the blog post. Does turning debug in the background affect the debug from no to yes in the user's URL on the next page load? No, it does not affect the URL. That's another big reason, actually, Matt, is it doesn't change the URL, but it does keep the message. This, of course, when you use this, it changes the URL. And I mean, that does all kinds of problems too. So like if I do this and I change it to app trace here, it puts it in the URL. Then if I go to another page and then I turn it off, if I then turn it off and then I use the back button, it's going to turn it back on. It's just, so now I come back here, I use the back button. Now it's back on. It does all kinds of things. I just don't like this anymore. I don't want this in the URL. Anyway, from that perspective, I just always use this one. Let's see, next one. Where can we find Apex Debug webinar registration? Yeah, I think we need to do it. So the next thing is, oh yes, so bind variable. Oh, we did that. The explain plan. Okay, what's
and
next?
we mentioned Apex debug message, Apex debug.error, .warning, and there is another one which is
enter.
.enter. Sorry, I was confused. It's actually a good practice to use to log a routine's name and its arguments in very simple and clear way.
Right. So if you just create some sample code from Apex, if you just create some sample code, the package body is going to have in it Apex debug.enter. And I think this is a great thing that we should all be doing in all of our code. If you do Apex debug.enter in every procedure you write, something like this, you'll instrument your code right away. You'll at least know when packages or when procedures are being run. You can do this everywhere in your code. It will work great. And it only really has an effect when debug is turned on. If debug is not turned on, it won't. And it's not just when debug is turned on. Debug has to be set at a level that will cause this to happen. And that's another good reason for this. We have Apex application enter here. Apex application enter, if you want to see that level, that's more than info. So you actually have to be up to enter. It's less than trace though. So if you get to there, you can just search, you can just write those. So it gives you another discrete point, especially when you're using this page. So I think Apex application.debug.enter is a great function that we should be using. I'm going to add a little piece of this though, to just point out what I do. If it's a procedure, I think this is just fine. Just do this, no problem at all. It really isn't going to have any kind of negative effect. The procedure will run. It will go into Apex debug enter. It will realize debug's not turned on, and it will continue processing, and it doesn't take much time. If it's a function though, and that function could be used in a query, in a SQL select statement. For example, this function right here is being used in this select statement right here, right? So this function is getting called over and over and over and over again. It's being called so frequently. In that case, I recommend that you wrapper this in something like this. If Apex application debug, then. So what you're doing is you're only even moving into this procedure if debug is enabled. Under only that circumstance do you do that. Or if you want to go a step farther, if you want to make sure that you only even check, because this is a variable. So Apex, the PL SQL engine actually has to check this variable every time to see if it has changed, right? You can even go a step farther. You can do a PL SQL package level, and you can make your own constant. So it will only get checked once throughout your session until the PL SQL state gets re-enabled. So if you do that, then you can do this, and it's even faster. And so in those scenarios, it's rare that this would ever be a problem if you've got millions of rows, that kind of thing. But what I will tell you is that the Apex development team uses the equivalent of Apex debug.enter. They use www.flow debug.enter throughout theirs. And you'll see throughout, when you do a trace, you can see their code, what they have used in this. They use this method. If it's a function that can be called in a lot of places, they're going to use this because they are concerned about performance as well. So this is just a little performance thing that I think is important. That I think is important for folks to know about. I could go on, and I have gone on and on. I could go on for an hour. We should do an Apex debug webinar that digs into all of the other topics that you and I wanted to cram into 5 minutes and realized that we had already gotten to like 25 minutes. Yes. But these are a few that I think everyone can utilize right away. And I do think that using the monitor activity page has huge benefits. And it does, one of the main benefits is just that ability to discretely run a dynamic action or something else without having to reload the whole page.
Yes, especially if we have multiple processes or dynamic actions going on the page.
Yes, yeah. And my standard operating procedure when I log into an Apex environment to do any kind of Apex work at all, right away I open up that monitor activity tab so that it's already open, and then I can just go flip to that tab, and that's my number one approach. I do that all the time. So
yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious if others implement this, what their experience will be. So if anyone watches this and then they actually use that piece of it, or Apex debug.enter or any of the other things we talked about. But I'm curious what your experience is. If you like the experience better, I find it to be a huge improvement. So, and I know you've implemented that as well, Marwa, right? You do the
Yes,
same?
yes, yes, exactly.
Excellent. All right. Well, I have nothing else because people have already wasted a perfectly good, looks like 20 minutes with us today. So do all the things you're supposed to do. If you like the show, all those other things. Tweet about it. I don't even know what you call it anymore. X about it. Send your letter to your mom. Tell her about the show. Talk to you soon. See you next week.
Talk to you soon. Bye.